Hello, everyone. My name is Erik Hiltunen. Welcome to the New Words poster for the 2021 Conference for Global Transformation. This is an excerpt of a conversation that I had with Diane Creel and Charles Hildebrand earlier this week. And you'll find us talking about new words, exploring what's possible in the creation of new words. And if you follow the handout, and actually please follow the link, you'll have an opportunity to generate new words yourself. Really excited to see what you come up with. In particular, one of the words that we talk about is remembery, and that came out of a conversation I had with my son Leo, who asked me a question. Don't quite remember what that question was, but I remember my answer was something along the lines of, Leo, I really wish I knew. If I was more remembery, I'm sure I could tell you. And with that, enjoy the conversation and have fun. Let's generate some words.
And it's so funny, those times and places where we have a word like forgetful and then try to think of the opposite, the antonym, and there just isn't one, right? So we get to make one up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the great thing with memory is that it's intuitive to what it means. It's not something you have to figure out what it means. It's just like pretty obvious, remembery. And the other cool thing is that a word like that is it kind of like catches in your mind, so you don't have to be particularly remembery to remember it. We were talking about the other day with stuff about, it's like stuff we carry from our parents, and how sometimes we feel the effects of momination. Again, it's not a word that people use, but you kind of know what it means.
And I love that word as well, with that partnership distinction, right? So, being in that mother-child field, I mean, that really adds something beyond just the cultural cliche, of like, mom, I mean, that's something that's alive in our culture.
And then there's another word that we've come up with.
It's just a word that had no context. So, it's like, for whatever, it's like, all right, we could create a word like arglefarp. Great. What does arglefarp mean? Who knows?
For me, when you said arglefarp, like the sounds of that word sort of evoked something. It kind of evoked like the sensation of my stomach getting tied up in knots.
I kind of use it for the word that has no meaning. It could mean anything, or it could be nothing. It could be the undefinable word.
I love having a word for note that has no meaning. Like,
it could be used as a means, like an interjection, like, you can use it to replace a curse word, right? So, arglefarp, right? But actually, maybe it could actually be something that somebody says when there's no word for what there is to say. It's like, arglefarp, and just to, like, almost like a placeholder, like there's something that I'm trying to say here and there is no word for it yet. I guess, this kind of leads us to, why would we want to invent new words? What's the point?
I notice in communication, in talking with people, especially if I'm sharing, that I will run into an experience that I'm trying to communicate, and just the words that I have access to are inadequate for giving somebody else the flavor of what it is that I'm trying to communicate. Other languages seem to have words that English doesn't. For example, and we use them, things like Schadenfreude, is one of those that there just really isn't an English word. Ennui is just not really an English word. But then there are things where we run into that we just don't have a word of any sort.
Yeah. And I love that it can go both ways, right? You can have an experience, and kind of need a word. Or if you hear a word that you've never heard before, you can, oh yes, right, I've had that experience, right? So it can kind of go either way.
Because there are other forms of language, with like structural language and immediate language. Inside of representational language, there are limits that we have. Mm-hmm. And is it because we just haven't had the word yet to represent that part of human experience?
Yeah, I mean, in general, it seems when you really dig into it, of the ways of communicating, representational language is the weak tea of communication. It has so many limits.
And it's the one that we use the most.
Yes, it is, that we rely on it.
And it's also the one that makes us uniquely human. Yep. Other organisms definitely utilize structural and immediate. And representational is the most human.
Yep.
And it's so funny that there's still so many immediate and structural pieces that come out, like experiences that we don't actually have words for.
So how do we go and intentionally invent new words then?
I think first we run into a space where there are no words, where we're trying to communicate something and there are no words. And then you kind of have to either struggle with how to communicate it, or like remember, it just happens to fall out of your mouth.
And that's like using existing words or existing pieces of words, right? To kind of put something together that explains an experience. That sort of structural connection that Erik was talking about with Arglefarp, right? Like that it makes him feel this immediate and structural. There's this aspect too, you know. So I think there could also alternatively be a place for play. Like let's just put some sounds together and see how that makes us feel.
Yeah.
What does that bring about structurally? What does that bring about in immediate language? You know, so it could go either way, either from the structural and immediate into representational, right? Like I'm having an experience now, how do I say it? Or it could be even more, I'll say creative, representational sounds together and then say what it represents based on how it feels.
And it would be really interesting, because some of the new words that we could invent, like remembery, that could be something that makes a lot of sense for somebody that speaks English, right?
Mm-hmm.
But somebody who speaks Cantonese, remembery might not mean all that much. But could, like inside of like Arglefarp, could there be words that kind of start to generate or evoke that sensation that may transcend cultures?
I love that. Sort of like music is a universal language, right? But could there actually be a verbal representational set of sounds that is a universal language? And back to your question though, Erik, right? What's possible? I mean, for me, what I hear is like full and complete self-expression. And there's self like individual, but there's also self like family or culture, right? Something like the Urban Dictionary adds a whole nother level of self-expression to society. That's what new words is as a possibility for me, right? And some of that's, again, the self-expression of the immediate and the structural, and some of it is an exploration of how can my experience shift based on that new word. And there's just so much play, there's so much freedom in that.
Well, that's it. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation. I hope that you engaged and generated new words yourself and submitted some. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll just leave you with one word: Arglefarp.